Volkan. Günaydın. Burada olduğum için çok mutluyum. This is all I know in Turkish. So from now on it's going to be English, sorry. As Volkan mentioned, there are going to be 4 different lectures that cover, I'd say, a taste of various aspects of entrepreneurship from the perspective me personally have been involved in and so on. So generally speaking, feel free at any moment to raise the hand and ask questions, and we'll see how the things evolve. I have also additional topics, so if we are ahead of time or something, I may want to present something else in the extra time if so happens. The first discussion has to do with entrepreneurship education, okay? So the first thing that comes to mind is, what is entrepreneurship? So if any of you have some ideas of what it is, this is an opportunity to have your opinion. So what do you think is, are you familiar with the word entrepreneurship? Okay, so what is it? Any idea? Yes, Volkan.
To do something new.
To do something new, okay. To? Take interest. Yes?
Risks.
Take risks. Okay, good, great. Okay, anything else? By the way, I found it interesting, somebody told me a different answer that said it's for somebody who doesn't like bosses, so he wants to be the boss of himself, okay? In any case, one thing to mention, it's not in the presentation, but from an academic point of view, at this point in time, entrepreneurship is not yet a discipline, okay? I met with many leading thinkers and researchers in the entrepreneurship area, and usually they publish their essays, articles, and so on under either marketing or business or things of that kind, journals, and not in, there are entrepreneurship journals, but they're not considered like in the top, level of so. But one of them told me, this was the same about marketing and business if you go back 50 years ago. Today, this is a discipline. It was not a discipline at the time, which means that probably 20 or 30 years from now, probably entrepreneurship is going to also be a discipline in academia. Now, I'll give you a few examples of people or, this is what they think entrepreneurship is all about. So this has to do with mindset. Some people who identify and pursue solutions rather than problems, okay, possibilities among needs and opportunities among challenges. So it's a mindset. It means, okay, it's not, yes, there are always difficulties, but my mind says I can overcome them. Okay, I can find solutions to problems. I can cope with challenges and so on. One of the leading organizations or institutes that deals with entrepreneurship is Babson College in the US. It's not renowned from most academic areas, but in entrepreneurship, it is one of the best. So in their website, if you go to it, you see all these definitions. And if you read them carefully, you don't need to study each and every one of them, but all of them are correct. Okay, all of them are valid, which means there is no one definition of what entrepreneurship is. It depends on what people think. I'll give you mine, by the way, in about 2 minutes. But you see that many people think different things about what entrepreneurship is all about. There's some that are important, and I'll give you why, okay? Jim Plummer, the reason I mention him is, and by the way, you should take down his name, he is the head of engineering at Stanford, okay? And he is a great thinker, more on the aspects of education rather than on entrepreneurship. He especially has a few presentations and articles that he wrote in 2013 about the fact that in the 21st century, you need to look differently in how you educate engineers. Okay, it's not what we used to do when we learned engineering, okay? And among other things, what he says is basically, as far as entrepreneurship, it means people that don't live with the status quo, but think things can be done better, okay? Another interesting aspect is, I don't know how many of you have heard of Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was the guru of management, okay? I was lucky, I was at Intel back in the 70s and in the 60s and 70s, and Peter was our mentor and our coach. I heard him several times teach about management. On this specific thing, what he says is entrepreneurship can be learned. Why is that important? Because some people say, hey, if you are born Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, then you have it. You don't need to go to school. You don't need to have anything because you have it. And if not, tough luck. So what he says, and I agree with him, is yes, there are those who were born with this, a touch of gold or whatever, but they are the exception. Generally speaking, most people are common people like all of us. They can still learn entrepreneurship, okay? It's not like anybody can be an entrepreneur. You need to have some basic skills or whatever, but you can improve on them, okay? Like many teaching or many education aspects, you can become better if you understand the principles of it and if you are trained how to think correctly, how to organize things, how to worry about certain things, and so on. Okay, so the basic message from Peter Drucker, and I agree with him, is that entrepreneurship can be taught. Okay, sorry, I'll go back one. Okay, actually, I'll go through that and then I'll give you mine. The other thing is, this is taken from a friend of mine who gave a presentation to students about entrepreneurship. He says it's crazy. Okay, basically, and is there anybody here who is an entrepreneur or was an entrepreneur? No. Okay, so some of my best friends are entrepreneurs and so on. It's not like, it's all success, it's all glory. Okay, it's like a roller coaster. Okay, there are good days and there are bad days, and sometimes it's terrible and you think the world is collapsing, and sometimes you're sure you're already successful, you secured the funding and so on and so forth, and then something happens, something that is beyond your control, like 9/11, or the stock market falls, or the investor just got up in the morning and changed his mind, or whatever, things that are beyond your control. Or a competitor came in the last moment with a better offer or with a better product or whatever, and you lost your opportunity. It is a nightmare, okay, many times, and people put their life into it. Okay? They spend years sometimes on developing the business, on developing the product, and so on, and sometimes something happens in the last moment or whatever and kills the whole opportunity. And sometimes they are successful, okay? So it's a really exciting thing. I use this diversion to give some other messages that are not just for entrepreneurship, but they are important, okay? There's always this question about efficiency versus effectiveness, okay? So efficiency is doing the things right, okay? Effectiveness is by doing the right things, which is different, okay? You may do very well the wrong things, okay? So if you are efficient, but if you are effective, usually you do the right thing. You need to usually be both in order to be successful. So when you think about it, and it's true for your research, it's true for many aspects, try to worry about both things, how you do things, but also what you're doing. Because many people spend a lot of energy and a lot of skills on developing the wrong things. About enthusiasm, by the way, this is true for anything. Usually people ask me sometimes, what should I go and learn in the university, or what job should I take, and so on. And I tell them there are two criteria usually. One is you should be good at it. The other one is you should enjoy what you are doing. Okay? So if I'm getting up in the morning and I'm happy to go to work or happy to go to my research or whatever, this means I probably picked the right thing. Okay? If I'm getting up in the morning and I'm saying, okay, I need to go to work because I need to support my family or I need to make a living or whatever, but I hate my workplace, it's not going to fly. So this is true also for entrepreneurship. You need to like what you're doing. Faith, again, believe in what you're doing, namely that you're going to be successful eventually because, again, there are those ups and downs, and during the bad times, if you don't have the faith, you're going to just quit. So you better have that. I'm not going to go into all this. Okay, let me give you now my definition of entrepreneurship, okay? My definition is that entrepreneurship is simply making things happen, okay? Namely, and by the way, it does not need to be a startup, okay? It could be in a university, it could be in the government, it could be I don't know, in a shopping supermarket, whatever it is, okay? Suppose you have an idea, it's great, but it's not good enough. If you make your idea happen, you are an entrepreneur. And that means that you are mobilizing the skills, mobilizing the support of the management, you are mobilizing funds, whatever it is, in order to make whatever idea you have in mind happen. Once it happened, it means that you created something new. You changed something. And I said, again, it doesn't need to be a startup. It could be within a large organization. It could be an idea within a department. I believe that within UNAM, there has been a lot of entrepreneurship happening on new ideas, new things, not as a theoretical idea, but making them happen. In my mind, that's entrepreneurship. Okay? So that's my personal definition. Now, I go back to Plumbers, and the reason I mention him, again, I'm not going to go into all that. That all has to do with the fact that a new engineer or a new scientist needs to have much more than just being an expert in his domain. But rather, it's this. Okay, he developed and is promoting this team model that basically says, yes, everybody needs to have his technical expertise, the narrow and deep knowledge of, in your case, it's going to be material science or nanotechnology or whatever it is that you are an expert on. This is very important, but it's not sufficient. You need also to have shallow but broad exposure to all the other aspects, all the other skills, like leadership, like teamwork, like innovation, like entrepreneurship again. All those things are very important because the combination of those is strong, and that makes you make you successful. Again, I don't know, many of you may be in a research path, namely you're going to be researchers for the rest of your life. Others are going to go into business, are going to go into the world, let's say, as experts, as scientists, as engineers, as whatever. In both cases, usually there are relatively frequent changes in your career. Okay, like my parents, you know, they finished school and for 40, 45 years, they were in the same job in the same company until they retired. Okay, in my case, I already experienced somewhere around 7 or 8 changes where I changed companies or where I changed positions. You know, I started as a development engineer, then I became a manager, then I got into business, and so on and so forth. So you make changes. The reason I mention that is every time that a change is on the table, regardless of whether you initiate it or that you're forced to it, like you were fired from your work or the company is closed or whatever it is, you basically are in a position where you are perceived as a brand, as a product in the eyes of somebody who wants to hire you or who wants to nominate you. Okay, so look at yourself and say, okay, if I am now a product, if I am a brand, and people need to decide whether they want to hire me, whether they want to nominate me, okay, then I need to have all sorts of skills that are important. So the fact that I'm an expert, sometimes it's good enough. You know, if you want to be, continue to work as a researcher in the specific domain that you are in, and so on and so forth, maybe if you are the best engineer, it's good enough. In most cases, it's not good enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. You need to deal with people, deal with the organization, deal with plans, deal with decision-making, deal with all sorts of other challenges, okay, that if you are better than others on that, you're going to get the job. Otherwise, they're going to take somebody else, despite the fact that you may be a better scientist or a better researcher. Okay, so it's important that from a career-building position, now it's not necessarily just to be an entrepreneur, just to be a professional in the fast-changing world that we are in. Probably you'd better acquire the other skills before you leave school. I mean, you can also cultivate them in the market. Personally, I did not get any training on all those. I acquired them while I was in my professional career, mostly at Intel. I spent 21 years with Intel Corporation, initially as an engineer and later on as a manager. I got a lot of training and a lot of hands-on on-the-job training, okay? But I'm saying is, when you think about yourself and about your career, and assuming you're going to want to, succeed, you want to change, you're going to develop, think not just about your expertise in your field, but also about all those other skills. Okay, so this is the T-shaped model that Jim Plummer developed. Now, until now, I've talked generally speaking about entrepreneurship and about some related topic. Now let me talk about education. Why should we educate people to become entrepreneurs? In the afternoon, I'm going to talk about a specific example, which is Israel as a startup nation or a high-tech nation and so on, okay? So I'll give you just the bottom line of it, and that is, if you ask yourself what made Israel be so successful business-wise, and the essence of it is that currently we're considered in the OECD, in the top, let's say 30, 40 economies, okay? The one thing that made it happen is entrepreneurship. Okay, so from a national point of view, and now let's talk about Turkey for a minute, okay? If you would like to make a jump, I don't know what is your GDP now per person, roughly? You know? $10,000 per person per year? Okay, so if you would like it to go from 10 to 20, okay? It's not going to work by just gradually, selling more and so on and so on. I think entrepreneurship is the key to that. So from a national point of view, okay, it is essential to have many, many, many more entrepreneurs and many, many, many more startups and other innovations or other initiatives that are going to change the landscape. Just an example, I told Volkan an hour ago, I visited a year ago, roughly, Twente, which is a university in the far east of Netherlands. And I realized that in that university was born Booking.com. I guess most of you, if you travel abroad, you use it, okay? It's now international. Nobody remembers where. It's still based in Twente, in the Netherlands, okay? I mean, this is a company of $40 billion or something like that value, okay? Which started in one university by one idea at a time. Same about the person who started Airbnb or started Uber or started many other, so my point is, if you get on an idea which is revolutionary for the global economy or for the global world, then you can change or you can improve the quality of the whole economy or the whole nation that you're in. Okay? So my point is that for us to teach people to be entrepreneurs makes a lot of sense from a national point of view. Same about the institute, okay? I'll take again the example of the University of Twente. Clearly they have vested interest in teaching their people to become entrepreneurs because the return is tremendous. Okay, so the general speaking then, it's clear that we would like sorry, this is a different slide, so about teaching, okay? So it's clear that we would like to educate people. Now back to the student itself. Why should a student become an entrepreneur or learn to become an entrepreneur? I actually gave the motivation in the prior slides. okay, is because if I would like to be successful, okay, then those skills are general, not necessarily just to be an entrepreneur, but to become successful in my career and so on. Okay, this is improving me as a person, improving me as a brand, improving me as a person who brings solutions to the world. And as I said, makes things happen and so on. So it's, on the face of it, it sounds like, hey, sure, everybody should be studying entrepreneurship. Well, it turns out that while it is so desirable, okay, still it is very difficult to make it happen. Sorry, I'll go to the other direction. So what is the challenge? Now, let me be specific first about Israel, and then we can take it generally speaking. In Israel, when you get to the age of 18, you don't go to college, okay? You go to the army. So you spend 3 years in the army with all its ups and downs and so on. Then, when you finish your army, usually you take 1 year and go to the, to South America or to Southeast Asia and travel around and so on and so forth. So you start studying usually at the age of 22, give or take. And when you are at the age of 24 or so, already, usually many of them already marry, have children, things of that kind. Okay. Furthermore, which is interesting, I don't know if that is common here, but in the Technion, for example, where we are, almost every student from the 3rd year on spends 2 days a week working in the industry. Okay, so if I'm an electrical engineer student or computer science student or mechanical engineering student or biomedical engineering student, okay, usually I spend 2 days a week working in the industry. Actually, personally, when I was in Intel, I was there doing this. I'm talking now about 40 years ago. I was the first who started this trend by taking students from the university in the 3rd year to start working 2 days a week at Intel. It has a lot of advantages, okay? The first advantage is that you see how people really work. You learn in the class, it's all very nice, but it's usually not too related to what you do at work, okay? So there, when you go to work in IBM or in Microsoft or in Intel or in Google or whatever it is, you see how things really happen, okay? And it's very different. It gives you a sense of reality. Okay. Furthermore, you sharpen your skills on the things that are really relevant for your career. So in a sense, it's good. It's better than to wash dishes in a restaurant or clean houses or work as a guard in whatever. I mean, so it is beneficial for you as a student. And naturally also you get salaries, so it helps you make ends meet. Okay? The most interesting aspect is the fact that for those 2 years, you have time to look at the employer. Let's take Google, for example. You work at Google for 2 years. You look at Google and say, hey, is this a company I want to work for? By the same token, Google looks at you and says, is that a student, is that an engineer I want? After 2 years of experience, you have a much, much better idea about the student than on an interview of 2 hours. Okay, I mean, you really see how that person is performing, how he's related with the team, how he's making presentations, how he reports about his work, is he meticulous, whatever, any aspect that has to do with the skills that are relevant. So at the end of those 2 years, it is natural that something like 50% of those who worked as students will continue naturally to become engineers at the very same company. Actually, because of the startup nation that we are in, okay, for the large companies, it's very, very difficult to get good engineers without this scheme. Okay? When they compete with the startups can offer much higher salaries, they can offer stock options, they can offer the stars. They don't deliver always on that, but still, to get an engineer fresh out of school, not through this system, is almost impossible. So I'm now giving you the reality on the ground is that those people work 2 days a week, okay, and it has a lot of benefits. From our perspective as the entrepreneurship program, it is a problem because these people have 3 days a week that they are studying already, 2 days that they work at the company, Okay? Sometimes they also have family at home. The last thing they want to hear about is yet another class or another project. Okay? So they say, leave me alone, I'm too busy anyhow, I just want to check mark that I finished the things that I must have in order to get my degree and get on with life. So we are competing with, from the student's point of view, we're competing for their attention and so on, and it's not easy. Furthermore, by the way, I spent 40 years in the high-tech industry. And back 4 years ago, I went into the Technion, which is like Bilkent, let's say, for the sake of discussion, to become the Entrepreneurship Center manager. And I was shocked, because when I'm in the industry, I was a manager, okay? I make a decision, everybody goes and does it, okay? No arguments. I mean, yes, there are arguments always before and so on, and I listen to everybody and so on, but once a decision is made, you go and implement. You can always leave the job, but if you want to stay in the job, okay, once management decided about something, this is the project we're going to work on, the other project is nice, but we don't have resources for it, or we don't have time for it, or we don't like it, sorry, go work on the one that we decided. Okay, and that's how the industry works. Okay, I mean, all the business world works, is that there is an echelon, there is a management scheme, and if the bosses decide, you go and work. In the academia, it's the other way around. The president of the Technion decides about something, and nobody gives a damn. Okay? I mean, I was in that, and they decided that entrepreneurship is important. Who cares? I mean, there are 17 faculties or schools at the Technion. I had to go one by one, talk with the dean, present to the council, I think it's academic council, and so on. And they decide, and some of them decided it's important, and many of them decided, no, entrepreneurship, we don't care about it. I mean, we have more important things. Or the students have limited time. We want them to focus on physics or on chemistry or whatever it is, okay? So it was an uphill battle to, you know, do this, I call it team camp policy. You know, I mean, you beg and so on from one to one to get them to agree that students can study entrepreneurship in their class or in their faculty. So both from the students' point of time or their attention and from the faculty, it wasn't easy. It was a challenge. So what did we do about it? And this is what I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so about, is the specific program we had at the Technion. I must confide, I did not invent it and so on. It started almost 10 years before I joined. I enhanced it. Namely, there are certain things that didn't work well and I simply killed them. And there are certain things that worked well and we enhanced them, we made them tick better. But it's not like I don't have any rights of, you know, that I invented here, anything that, but the point is these are programs that you could consider as Bilkent or as UNAM or as whoever to adopt some of those ideas. That's why I bring them here. Okay, so I pretty much discussed this. Okay, so the Entrepreneurship Center, okay, is basically where the know-how about entrepreneurship is, you know, centered and that is orchestrating things. Not everything is being done by us, but we are trying to, again, make things happen across the campus. Okay? Now, by the way, I mentioned here something. I left the Entrepreneurship Center almost a year ago because I reached the age of 68, and at 68, you are retired. You're forced to retire, actually. Luckily enough, I bred a second in command, Dr. Dana Sheffer. She is now running the organization, so it went smoothly. So I'm not running it. Last month, there was a bid by the education funding, something of the national education funding, something about entrepreneurship centers. And there was a bid on that, and the Technion applied, and they were one of the 3 winning universities. So they got now 10 million shekels, which is roughly $2.5 million for entrepreneurship programs funded by the government. So they're going to have much more money than I had in my programs, and I think it's going to enhance it much, much further. Also, in order to get that, the Many of the bodies in the Technion had to commit that they are going to participate in that. So she's going to have a much easier time getting collaboration from many of the people in the Technion. But basically, what does it have? First of all, we need to understand that the students vary. There are those who want to hear something about it. Hey, I heard the word entrepreneurship. I have no clue what it is. I want to hear a little more about it. Maybe it's interesting, maybe not. Then there are those who really want to go into it, but have no clue how to do it. And all the way to people who are already entrepreneurs, but they need help. Help in some specific decisions, help in the direction they're taking, and so on and so forth. So our job is to cover the whole spectrum from beginners all the way to experts. Generally speaking, we have two kinds of programs. We have academic programs, which is classes, and we have the extracurricular ones. The difference is very obvious. Okay? On academic classes, you get credit points. Okay? Namely, if you have a degree that you need to collect so many points and so on, then these are courses that you are getting credit about. They are also formed usually as courses, one way or the other. The extracurricular ones, you get no points. Okay? But on the other hand, they are much more effective. Okay? If I make a general statement here, which is relevant to not just entrepreneurship, to anything. Okay? I mentioned that we deal a lot with the education in the 21st century. Okay? It is the fact that experiential programs, namely where you learn things through doing, not through listening, are much, much more effective. Okay? So I'll give you examples when we go further. Okay? But classes are nice, okay, and so on, but in the most extreme way, I would say they are passé, okay? Volkan mentioned I'm now in a strategic research organization. One of the things we look at is education in the 21st century, and there we say that the professors shouldn't be lecturers anymore. They should be more of mentors and coaches, okay? You know the term reverse class, you know, where you learn at home and you come here to discuss and to ask questions, okay? Or you learn from online courses or all sorts of things. And primarily, you learn from doing. You do projects and you learn from your own experience. So this is what is extracurricular one. So let me talk first about the academic classes. We have, generally speaking, several tens of classes a year in the campus. Some of them are focused or centered in the MBA program, which is for graduate students. But about 15 to 20 of them are in the undergraduate. And they go into roughly three kinds of classes. First, we have what we call faculty-specific entrepreneurship classes. Like we have entrepreneurship for electrical engineers, or entrepreneurship for biomedical engineers. We have about close to 10 of those in the faculty. They are being taught usually either by a faculty member who himself or herself were an entrepreneur, or by an entrepreneur that comes from the outside. But it has three advantages. One advantage is you get points for your degree. Okay? Namely, it is part of your building up those 160 points or whatever it is that you need in order to get the degree. Secondly, it's being taught in the school that you are in. You don't need to go to the end of the campus in order to get the lesson. And third, which is most important, the examples being given are from the domain that you are in. So in electrical engineering, you'll get examples of electrical companies or electronic companies and so on. Same in biomedical or whatever it is. Then we have some general introductory classes. And the third, which is I think the most interesting one, is we have what we call, how do you call it? A secondary degree. I mean that you can get a minor. Okay, like if you have a major in let's say, mechanical engineering, you can have a minor in entrepreneurship. Namely, you can get a degree in entrepreneurship in parallel to your studies. All you need to do is take 4 classes that are provided centrally by us, by the Central Center of Entrepreneurship. So these are more deep classes into entrepreneurship fields. They deal very deep into IP issues, into legal, finance, funding, market, business, and so on. And the last class in that is what is called a capstone. It's usually a project where you take something from an idea stage all the way to business plan and to a pitch to investors. Now, so these are all, I'm not going to cover further. I'll go into the extracurricular because in my mind this is the more interesting part of our activities. Generally speaking, we talk about 4 domains. Most obvious one is consultations and mentoring. Namely, I remember giving roughly 100 sessions of mentoring every year to people, to students, to faculty members, to whoever, who want to get some advice on a project or an idea they have. Sometimes it's just, hey, I have an idea, I want to make a company out of it. Where do I start? What do I do? And so on. To people who already are working on something and they ask yourself, is this the right time to issue a patent, or should I issue a patent or not? Is this the time to go and ask for funding? If I ask for funding, where should I go and get the money from? Should it be for equity? Should it be for what? And so on and so forth. Should I hire more people? Should I not hire more people? And so on. Where do I take the product to? How do I find the market? You know, all those kind of questions, which we, on a personal basis, we are giving people advice. Okay? In most cases, it's just initial advice, and then we turn them into some professional people outside, and this is something we may discuss later. But there is the whole, in Israel, there is the whole ecosystem that has incubators and accelerators and other means and VCs naturally and so on, so that you can turn to professionals and are going to, you know, spend days and weeks and more with the teams and lead them towards success. Meetups. Meetups is basically once every month or so, or twice a month, we bring in an experienced, successful entrepreneur to spend an hour with the students, usually at 6 p.m. We give them beers and refreshments and so on, and they listen to the story. Usually, interestingly enough, those entrepreneurs focus more on their failures than on their successes, because you learn more usually from failures than from successes. And later on, they have questions and answers and so on. And in some cases, that even develops some bonds with some people from the audience who want to get further advice from those people or collaborate with them and so on. The most interesting ones are the other two, competitions and workshops. Let me start with workshops. I mean, there are all sorts of workshops. There are hackathons. Probably you have also hackathons here, where you go on a specific topic, and it's more technology-based on finding solutions to specific things like fintech, or like biomedical this and that domain, or things of that kind. I'm going to give one example that in my mind conveys a lot of what we're doing. And this is called the 3DS. Stands for 3 Days Startup. Okay? It goes like that. Usually we have a call for applicants. We get about 120, 150 applicants coming, applying. We go through their CVs. We ask them, why do you think it's important? Do you have an idea about what you want to do, and so on and so forth? Then about 70 of them we interview, and we select about somewhere around 45 of them to get into the class. The class itself, not class, into the, let's call it boot camp or workshop. It starts usually Tuesday evening around 6 p.m. or so. We ask each one that has an idea. First of all, none of them has any entrepreneurial experience from before, and we also try to make it varied audience. We don't want, 20 electrical engineers. We want people from all faculties, and also some with business business training or with architects and all sorts. So it's going to be as diverse as possible. So we ask those that have an idea about a product or a company to present their idea. They have 2 minutes each. So about half of them, let's say 20, present each an idea. Then the audience, those 45, have the whole night to debate, to think, to whatever. At the end of it, they need to vote which were the ideas that they liked. Let's say the 3 top or whatever it is. We collect all this. I mean, this is done on the computer very easy, and you get the top 10. Okay, so in the morning we announce those are the top 10. At that moment, the person who suggested an idea that was selected becomes actually the manager of the company or the team that is going to develop this further. Now, I want to emphasize, and this is something that I want to emphasize generally speaking, all our focus is on the business aspects, not on the technological aspects. Okay, we always, in all our programs, okay, we assume that you are better than anybody in solving the technology problem. Okay, so in our mind, the technical aspects are solved. We don't worry about them. Now, assuming you have a problem solved, or assuming you developed something, how do you make it now a business? How do you make a company out of it? How do you define the markets and so on and so forth? We're going to discuss it further in the next presentation. So basically speaking, okay, we give them a presentation like I'm going to give you in the next hour, which has to do with lean startup, namely what is the basic business model. And they, for the next 2.5 days, as a team, need to work to make this idea work. So the first thing that person needs to do is to recruit a team. Out of the remaining 35 or so people, to recruit another, let's say, 4 members that are going to join him or her to make it, you know, a team for a company. So once, it usually takes a couple of hours. Towards lunchtime, we have 10 teams formed, and then they start working on their problem. They look into, you know, patents, into business models, into anything to do. Interestingly enough, half of them, within a couple of hours, come back to us and say, hey, we realize that our idea is not going to fly, okay? Because there is a prior patent, because there is a product already in the market, because it's going to take us 10 years to develop it, because, and so on and so forth. So we tell them, okay, the 5 of you, okay, now go back from the other ideas in the team, select another idea and go with it. And usually, so towards 2 p.m. or so, we have 10 teams with an idea that they like, that they start working on. Now for a day and a half, we bring in every 3 hours, 5, 6 mentors that are experts in the field or experts in, you know, experienced entrepreneurs, VCs, whatever it is, and they go around the teams, they listen to the thing, and give them feedbacks, suggestions, ideas, and so on. So what they need to do as a team, they need to, within the day and a half, including the night, by the way, we tell them, for those 2.5 days, you don't do anything else. You are committed 100%. You may sleep. That's the only thing. You may also, up to a point, you work on your project. So they work on that, and they usually, eventually get, by the end of Thursday evening, they usually get to the point where they have their business plan pretty much formed. What does it mean? I'll show you in the next presentation. What does a business plan mean? Then also, in the morning of Friday, they work on a pitch, which means on a PowerPoint presentation, basically, on their company or the product to sell to investors. And at noon, we bring 5 VCs, and they are a panel, and each of the 10 teams presents to them for 5 minutes their company. They don't get money. I mean, if you do work on something 2 days, you usually don't get money, but they get very good feedback, very good advice. Now, we get out of this exercise, which, you know, is pretty straightforward in a sense, but still very intense, you get 2 things. One is about half of the teams that were created in that workshop, of people who didn't know each other before they came there, they become teams that continue working on that, sometimes for years. Sometimes they become the kernel of companies. There were real companies that were built out of teams that were created in 3-day startup. Not necessarily on the same problem that they worked on in the workshop. Sometimes afterwards they decide, okay, this idea is not worth much, but I have a better idea that I'm going to work on and go on with life. So it is a good mechanism to create multidisciplinary teams. The other thing is, each and every one of those 45 people who went through that process, there's no way of looking back. in my terms, it's called, they were infected by the virus of entrepreneurship. Okay, it's so exciting. There's so much adrenaline into it that it changes your life in a sense. And that's very important because in our mind, there are many engineers who, until they go through that exercise, they want to be engineers and scientists and so on for the rest of their life. And if they don't have this wake-up call, okay, they're not going to change their style or they're not going to change their focus. So this gives them the motivation to become entrepreneurs sometime in their life. Not necessarily immediately, it could be 5 years later. But still, it is effective in that sense in getting the motivation that we have. So that's 3-day startup. The last thing I'm going to mention is Bistec. And I'm going to do it very briefly because we're running out of time. Bistec is an annual program. This is not 3 days. This is usually, effectively, it's like 6 to 7 months. But before that, we have, around November, we have the call. Now, we have the call for submissions. We issue it nationwide, although in reality, 80% of those that apply are from the Technion, or 70 to 80%. But anybody who is a student from any university can apply. This is for teams, not for individuals. And they already need to come with an idea and to express it very carefully. I didn't mention yet, but in the center we have about 200 mentors, all of them volunteers. Okay? None of them gets any compensation except for satisfaction. And we use them as the judges. We give each such an application, at least 5 mentors or 5 such experts are looking at it and giving on it scoring and so on and so forth. We pick the 30 that are going to go into the program. In early April, we have usually the kickoff where we tell who got accepted and who not. And the 30 that get into the program, they go into a spring school of entrepreneurship, let's call it, where every other week we have a whole day of classes, mentors coming in and so on, but most of the work they need to do in between those gatherings where they work on their project with the coaching of mentors and the team and so on. And then in late June, we have the first judgment where all 30 present their startup, and we have a team of judges from the mentors, out of which they pick 12 that go into the summer program. In the summer program, which is more intense, actually July usually is a month of exams, so we don't do anything. We let them worry about their studies. But August and September, we have every week a whole day of, again, more lectures and especially mentors. We also assign a personal mentor to every team that comes from the domain that the product that they are aiming at is from. And they work with them for another 2 months. And then in late September, early October, we have the final judgment and we pick the winners. And what is more important is in early October, we have what we call a demo day, where we bring in around 300 people from the industry, you know, VCs and the media and entrepreneurs and everybody who is somebody. And they listen to those 12 teams present, and then they have booths and so on. And from there, they start their own life. We don't have any strings attached. No equity is taken. We don't take any tuition, anything. We just want to encourage them to start with it and fly. Now, the nice thing about it, and I'm going to just show you probably. I'm going to skip this is all, you know, I could spend time on it, but I don't. Okay. Okay. This is an example of companies that were born in Bistec. Some of them before my time, some of them during my time. They raised over $400 million already in funding after they left Bistec. Okay? And there were also already exits, namely companies that were acquired or that went public and so on. Many of them are still, but they're like somebody like Brizometer. I mean, they were invited to President Obama as one of the promising startups in the world. And they just raised lately another $10 million and so on. Another one which doesn't show here, there is a guy called Plummer London. He won in 2009. And afterwards, he already established 2 companies. The last company that he established just raised $2 billion. I mean, sorry, he raised $500 million with a valuation of $2 billion in NASDAQ. Okay, so he's very successful. And he says, hey, I started in Bistec. Okay, namely, it gave me the first push start. Another guy called Iran Eden, he he started again in Bistec, and he's now just raised $70 million for a company in the medical area. So, and these are not in those statistics actually, because as an individuals, they started something else, which is not related to Bistec, but their initial training was in Bistec. The general message here is that people get more from a program when they work on their own issue. You know, they deal not with a theoretical question, but rather on my product, do I need a patent, don't I need a patent? Who are my customers? All the things that we're going to discuss in the next hour, okay, they deal with them not at a theoretical level, but at the practical level of their own project. And that makes it a much, much more effective training. So that's it. Questions? Yes?
I'm curious about the survival rates. Do you have an idea roughly how many startups are started by technical students, let's say within a couple of years of graduation, and then how many of them actually survive to a certain maturity?
We don't have statistics on specific on technical graduates. Generally speaking, the survival rate, or the success rate is roughly 4 to 5%. Namely, out of 100 companies that start, okay, 4 or 5 become successful in the sense that they either become public, namely they have an exit, namely either they become public or they are acquired by somebody for over, let's say, $50 million. Okay, this is considered success. Naturally, there is also market share. Actually, in the afternoon, I'm going to talk about one of the companies, Given Imaging, that I was VP R&D of, that got, you know, like 90% market share and all sorts of other aspects of that you can say, no doubt it is a successful company. I think the rate of technion graduates is within the statistics, maybe a little better. So I think it's more to do with how many people start rather than are their odds better. Yes, I mean, there is one, if I were to put one element of that would project success, it's going to be experience of the leading people. Okay, somebody who worked on 5 startups already has a better chance of somebody this is his first startup, even if all 5 were failures. Okay, namely, you gain experience, and also that's how VCs look at it. They look at, okay, what is your track record, or what is the things that you've done before, and assuming that you learn from each experience and so on, there is a chance that you're going to be much better in the next one and so on. And if you were successful, clearly. I have good friends now that they started a company. The VCs are running after them to take their money, okay, because they were successful in the Plummer things that they've done. Okay, so very different than most people who are begging for VCs to even look at them. Okay, so it has to do with your record. Yes?
In Israel, we see most of the big world corporate companies have some R&D activity.
Yes. I'm going to talk about it in the afternoon. Yeah.
Does that factor become important when it comes to the exits for startups? The exits, as we talk of the local startups, happen to be through these big corporate companies, actually in international level, or does it happen more at the national level by local companies?
Well, there's almost no national company. I mean, all exits are either you go public, I mean, in NASDAQ or in whatever, or you get acquired by global companies. Not necessarily the ones that are operating in Israel. There is some cases where it's not that the fact that you were operating in Israel made the connection, but the experience, let's take Intel, for example. Intel has very good experience for now 45 years in Israel, okay? So in a sense, when they see an Israeli company, a priori, they have some mindset that says, hey, we like those, you know, entrepreneurs, we like those, and so on. The recent example was Mobileye, which was roughly a year ago. It was acquired for $15.3 billion. The biggest exit ever in Israel by Intel, okay? But there was no connection between Mobileye and the Intel activities in Israel. It was done through the corporate. But their experience with the Israelis probably had some influence on the decision making. That's my reading. Yes. Yes, that will be the last question because we are behind.
Is this center open to only students or public?
Most activities are open to anybody, but usually the focus is on students or on young graduates. Okay, people who left in the last 5 years or so. There are, Bistec and 3DS are limited to only students. Okay, but on Bistec, for example, you have a team, at least one of the team members needs to be a student. The other 3 or 4 could be anybody. Okay, so that's like our confinement. Okay, but so our attention is on students, but in many, like the meetups are open to anybody. Okay, we advertise things, but effectively, I'd say 80 to 90% of our audience is students. So thanks for your time. I think we're going to get, how much, 10 minutes?
Like 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Maybe 10 minutes?
Whatever you, up to you.
We do 10 minutes.
10 minutes. So at 10 past 11, we're going to get again to the next lecture.